Chapter 1, The Fugitive. In the vast expanse of space, a massive prison ship silently drifted through the void, its destination unknown even to its crew. The ship was a fortress, designed to contain the most dangerous and elusive criminals the Galactic Federation had ever captured. Inside its heavily guarded walls, each cell was a high-tech cage built to hold individuals with extraordinary abilities, skills, and minds. But among the prisoners on board, one stood out. Known only as the Fugitive, he was notorious across the galaxy for his intelligence, cunning, and the ability to escape even the most secure facilities. Captured after years of evading the law, the Federation had finally managed to trap him, sealing him in one of their most fortified cells. Despite this, the Fugitive's sharp mind never rested. He had escaped before, many times. He would do it again. Hours into the voyage, the ship cruised silently through the darkness. The crew, confident in their impenetrable systems, operated on autopilot, maintaining the routines of transporting high-risk criminals. But deep within the belly of the ship, alarms began to blare. What appeared to be a routine malfunction in the power grid was, in fact, the result of a carefully orchestrated sabotage, something only a mind as brilliant as the Fugitive's could have conceived. Lights flickered as security systems faltered. The prison cells, lined with energy fields, began to lose power. Panic spread among the guards as they rushed to restore control, but it was too late. The Fugitive, always several steps ahead, had already disabled the key systems that could have kept him contained. He slipped out of his cell unnoticed, moving swiftly through the corridors as chaos erupted around him. His movements were precise, calculated. Every turn, every step was part of a plan he had meticulously crafted over weeks of observation. The prison ship was a labyrinth, but to him, it was a puzzle to be solved. He reached the control deck, a grin crossing his face as he hacked into the ship's mainframe. With a few deft keystrokes, he initiated the sequence for an escape pod launch. Alarms blared even louder as the ship's system detected the unauthorized activity, but by then, it was too late. As the escape pod disengaged from the ship's hull, the Fugitive took a deep breath. The pod blasted away from the massive prison ship, hurtling toward a planet below, an uncharted, desolate world shrouded in mystery. He had chosen this world deliberately, knowing that even the Federation would hesitate to follow him here. Through the pod's viewport, he watched as the planet grew larger. Its surface was harsh and unforgiving, with vast stretches of barren land broken only by jagged mountain ranges and strange, swirling clouds of dust. It wasn't a place anyone would willingly visit, but for the Fugitive, it was the perfect hideout. The pod pierced the atmosphere, shaking violently as it descended. The Fugitive braced himself, gripping the controls as the landscape rushed up to meet him. He had no idea what awaited him on this world, but one thing was certain, he was free. For now. With a bone-rattling impact, the pod crashed into the rocky terrain, skidding across the surface before coming to a halt. The Fugitive took a moment to steady his breath before unclasping the harness and standing up. His body ached from the rough landing, but he had no time to waste. He needed to move. Opening the hatch, he stepped out onto the planet's surface. The air was thin, dry, and filled with static electricity that crackled faintly around him. As he looked around, he saw nothing but desolation, an endless sea of rocks, cliffs, and jagged formations. It was a dead world, or so it seemed. But something about this place felt off. The Fugitive had a keen sense for danger, and every instinct told him that this planet held secrets he would need to uncover if he was to survive. He scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of shelter or resources. There was nothing immediately visible, but he knew better than to trust what he saw. The galaxy had taught him that survival often depended on what remained hidden. He moved quickly, heading toward a nearby outcropping of cliffs that might provide cover as night began to fall. The sun, or at least, what passed for a sun on this planet, was sinking below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. As he walked, the ground beneath his feet felt unstable, as if something stirred deep within the planet. Reaching the cliffs, the fugitive found a narrow cave entrance. It was small, barely wide enough for him to slip through, but it would serve as temporary shelter. As he entered the cave, he noticed strange markings etched into the walls, ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. They were unlike anything he had ever seen before, and the energy emanating from them made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He crouched down, examining the symbols more closely. They were old, worn by time, yet still pulsing with a strange, otherworldly energy. Who, or what, had left these here? And what did they mean? Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air, low and rhythmic. The fugitive tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon strapped to his side. He turned, scanning the darkness of the cave's entrance. Emerging from the shadows was a figure, tall, humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Its form shimmered in the faint light, and its eyes glowed with an eerie blue radiance. The fugitive's heart raced, but he stood his ground, ready for whatever came next. "You are not alone here," the alien said, its voice reverberating through the cave. "And this world is not what it seems." Chapter 2, The Descent. The escape pod hurtled through the atmosphere, the exterior heating up as it pierced the skies of the unknown planet. Inside, the fugitive gripped the controls tightly, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. He had faced peril countless times before, but there was something about this descent that felt different, dangerous, yet exhilarating. The pod's thrusters engaged, slowing its rapid descent as the surface of the planet came into view. Vast deserts stretched out for miles, broken only by towering cliffs and jagged mountain ranges. The skies above were a dull, swirling gray, filled with strange energy currents that crackled ominously across the horizon. This place was hostile, that much was clear. But it was also desolate, perfect for a fugitive looking to disappear. With a bone-rattling thud, the pod made contact with the ground, skidding across the rocky surface before finally coming to a stop. The fugitive unclasped the safety harness and stood, taking a moment to catch his breath. Outside, dust and debris settled in the aftermath of his landing, and the only sounds were the faint hum of the pod systems winding down. He opened the hatch cautiously, stepping out into the harsh, dry air. The gravity here was slightly heavier than he was used to, making each step feel deliberate and laborious. As his boots crunched against the rough terrain, he scanned the horizon. There was no immediate sign of life, no plants, no animals, not even a bird in the sky. This world felt dead. But the fugitive knew better. He had learned, through years of evasion and survival, that appearances were often deceiving. Somewhere on this planet, something was alive, he could feel it. And if he was to survive here, he'd need to understand this place and its secrets. He made his way toward the nearest formation of cliffs, hoping to find shelter before nightfall. The sun, or what passed for it on this planet, was already dipping low, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The air grew cooler, and a strange, electrical tension seemed to pulse through the atmosphere. As he approached the cliffs, something caught his eye, faint markings on the rocks, etched in patterns too deliberate to be natural. He knelt down, tracing his fingers along the carvings. They were old, worn smooth by time and the elements, but unmistakably artificial. Someone, or something, had been here before. Suddenly, a low hum resonated from deeper within the cliffs. The fugitive's hand instinctively went to the weapon strapped to his side, his senses on high alert. He slowly stood and followed the sound, cautious but curious. As he rounded a corner, he froze. There, hidden within a crevice of the rock, was a figure, tall, shadowy, and undeniably alien. Its form shimmered faintly, almost as if it were not fully solid, and its eyes glowed with an eerie blue light. The being stood motionless, watching him with a kind of detached interest, as if assessing whether he was a threat. The fugitive's heart raced, but he didn't move. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, the tension between them thick and heavy. Then, without warning, the alien figure took a step forward. "You are not from here," it said, its voice low and resonant, vibrating in the fugitive's chest. It spoke in a language he didn't recognize, but somehow he understood it perfectly. "I could say the same about you," the fugitive replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The alien tilted its head slightly, as if considering this response. "This is not your world, and yet you come here, seeking something. You are not the first." The words sent a chill down the fugitive's spine. "Not the first? What do you mean?" The alien didn't answer immediately. Instead, it extended a long, slender arm toward the cliff face. As it did, the markings on the rocks began to glow, pulsing with the same blue light as the alien's eyes. "Many have come here, searching for power, for refuge. Few leave." The fugitive's instincts screamed at him to leave, to run as far from this place as possible. But he was trapped, not just by the danger that lay before him, but by the knowledge that this planet held secrets he couldn't afford to ignore. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. The alien's gaze never wavered. "That is not the question. The question is, what do you want from this place?" Before the fugitive could respond, the alien figure faded into the rock, leaving only the glowing symbols behind. The hum of energy grew fainter, and soon, silence returned to the cliffs. Alone once more, the fugitive stood, staring at the spot where the alien had disappeared. His mind raced, filled with questions. What had the alien meant by others coming here? And what was this place hiding? One thing was certain, this planet was far from empty. And if he wanted to survive, he would have to unravel its mysteries before they consumed him. Chapter 3, Unseen Forces. The alien's words hung in the air, a cold reminder that this desolate planet was far from lifeless. The fugitive's grip tightened on his weapon, but he held his ground, his sharp eyes studying the figure before him. The alien moved with a grace that belied its tall, lanky frame. Its glowing blue eyes were unsettling, but not hostile, at least, not yet. "What do you mean, not what it seems?" the fugitive asked, his voice calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. The alien took a step closer, its gaze never leaving the fugitive. "This planet is a prison, much like the one you escaped from. But it does not hold its prisoners in cells of steel or bars. It holds them in the very fabric of reality. Those who come here seeking refuge or power rarely leave. The planet has a way of binding them to itself." The fugitive's mind raced. A prison without bars? It sounded like a metaphor, but the way the alien spoke, it felt like something far more literal. He had encountered many strange phenomena in his time, but this was something entirely different. Something ancient. "What are you?" the fugitive asked, lowering his weapon slightly but still on guard. He needed information, and the alien seemed willing to provide it, for now. The alien tilted its head, the blue glow of its eyes flickering slightly. "I am a sentinel. My kind have watched over this place for eons, guarding its secrets. We are bound to this world, just as you will be if you stay too long." The fugitive's stomach tightened at the implication. Bound to the planet? Was there really no escape from this place? "Why am I here?" he pressed, feeling a surge of frustration. "I chose this world because it was off the grid. No records, no traffic. But you're telling me this was a trap." The sentinel's expression was unreadable, but its voice softened. "It is no trap, yet you are not here by chance. The energies of this planet pull those who seek something more, power, freedom, escape. But the price is high." The fugitive exhaled, his mind racing through possible scenarios. Was this planet drawing people to it? And if so, why? He had chosen it as a refuge from the Galactic Federation, but it seemed the planet had chosen him as well. As the sentinel stood silently, the cave's walls began to hum again, the strange symbols glowing brighter. The fugitive could feel the energy shifting around him, as if the planet itself was reacting to his presence. It was subtle, but undeniable. You said there are others, the fugitive said cautiously, others who came here before me. Where are they now? The sentinel turned its glowing eyes toward the cave's entrance. Most are lost. Consumed by the planet's power. Some remain, trapped in the shadows between worlds, their minds broken by the forces they tried to control. The fugitive felt a chill run down his spine. This place wasn't just dangerous, it was a living entity, playing with those who dared to tread on its surface. But the fugitive wasn't one to back down easily. And what about you? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Why are you still here? I was once like you, the sentinel replied, its voice distant. I came here seeking power, knowledge beyond the reach of the galaxy. But I became a guardian instead, bound to this place. Now, I serve the planet's will. The fugitive studied the sentinel, his mind calculating. This creature had once been free, yet now it was a slave to the very thing it had sought. It was a fate he had no intention of sharing. There has to be a way out, the fugitive said, more to himself than the sentinel. There is always a way out, the sentinel replied, its voice taking on an almost wistful tone. But it is not one that most are willing to take. The fugitive raised an eyebrow. And what way is that? The sentinel's eyes flickered again. To leave, you must first understand the planet's energy. You must master it, or it will master you. Few succeed, and even fewer survive the attempt. A bitter laugh escaped the fugitive's lips. He had spent his entire life surviving the impossible, evading capture, outsmarting the galaxy's most formidable forces. He wasn't about to be taken down by a planet, no matter how ancient or powerful it was. Then I'll learn, the fugitive said, determination settling in his chest. If mastering this planet's energy is the only way to escape, then I'll do it. The sentinel regarded him for a long moment, as if weighing his resolve. Then, with a slow nod, it gestured toward the cave's glowing walls. The energy is everywhere, flowing through the rocks, the air, and the very core of this world. But it is volatile. Dangerous. Those who try to control it often lose themselves in its power. I've handled danger before, the fugitive replied, his voice hard. The sentinel stepped back, its form shimmering slightly. Very well. Follow the signs. They will guide you to the heart of the planet, where the energy is strongest. But be warned, there are others who seek the same power. And they will not welcome competition. With those cryptic words, the sentinel dissolved into the air, leaving the fugitive alone once more. The cave's symbols continued to glow, casting eerie patterns across the walls. The fugitive stood for a moment, his mind racing with the possibilities ahead. He wasn't sure what awaited him at the heart of this world, but he knew one thing: he had no intention of becoming another lost soul on this forsaken planet. Whatever this energy was, he would learn to control it. And then, he would find his way off this cursed rock, no matter the cost. With a final glance at the glowing symbols, the fugitive set off deeper into the cave, determined to uncover the secrets of this mysterious world and to survive the forces that had claimed so many before him. Chapter 4: The Depths. The fugitive moved deeper into the cave, the faint glow of the symbols guiding his path. As he ventured further, the air grew thicker, and the low hum of the planet's energy became more palpable. It was as if the very rocks around him were alive, vibrating with a frequency he couldn't yet understand. Each step felt heavier, not just from the gravity of the planet but from the invisible force that pressed down on him. The sentinel's words echoed in his mind. To leave, you must first understand the planet's energy. You must master it, or it will master you. The cave twisted and turned, narrowing at points, forcing him to squeeze through tight spaces. The walls were lined with the same ancient symbols, each one pulsing with a faint light, like a heartbeat. The energy felt stronger here, more concentrated, and the fugitive could sense that he was getting closer to something powerful. After what felt like hours of walking, the cave opened up into a vast chamber. The sight before him took his breath away. At the center of the chamber was a massive, crystalline structure, glowing with a vibrant blue light. It pulsed rhythmically, sending waves of energy through the air. The crystal seemed to be connected to the very core of the planet, and its power was overwhelming. But the fugitive wasn't alone. Standing near the crystal were three figures, each of them humanoid, but with distinct differences. Their skin was dark, almost metallic, and their eyes glowed with the same blue light as the crystal. They were watching him, their expressions unreadable, as if they had been expecting his arrival. The fugitive's hand instinctively moved to his weapon, but he didn't draw it. He knew a confrontation here would be unwise. These beings, whoever they were, seemed to be connected to the planet's energy in a way that he couldn't yet comprehend. One of the figures, a tall, slender individual with intricate markings across their skin, stepped forward. Their voice echoed through the chamber, not loud, but with a weight that made it impossible to ignore. "You are not the first to come seeking the crystal's power," they said, their tone measured. "But few have made it this far." The fugitive held their gaze, trying to mask the unease that crept up his spine. "I didn't come here for power," he replied. "I came here to survive." The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering his words. "Survival and power are often intertwined," they said. "Those who control the crystal control the planet. But it is not a gift that is freely given. The crystal chooses its master." The fugitive took a cautious step forward, his eyes never leaving the figure. "And what are you? Guardians? Or prisoners like the rest of us?" The other two figures remained silent, their eyes fixed on the fugitive. The one who had spoken smiled faintly, though it didn't reach their eyes. "We are both," they said cryptically. "Bound to the crystal, but free in ways you cannot yet understand." The fugitive's mind raced. There was something about the way they spoke, something unsettling. It was clear that they had been here a long time, perhaps even center. The figure's smile faded, replaced by a look of something akin to regret. "The crystal demands a price. Those who seek its power must give something in return. Most are unwilling to pay that price." A cold feeling settled in the pit of the fugitive's stomach. What kind of price? The figure stepped closer to the crystal, their hand hovering above its glowing surface. "The crystal is alive, in a sense. It feeds on the energy of those who seek to control it. It grants power, yes, but it also takes. The longer one is bound to the crystal, the more it consumes." The fugitive's gaze shifted to the other two figures. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes vacant, as if they had lost something of themselves over time. "Is that what happened to them?" he asked, nodding toward the other figures. The speaker's eyes darkened. "They made their choice. And now they belong to the crystal, as will you, if you seek its power." The fugitive clenched his jaw. He had no intention of becoming a slave to this planet, bound to its energy for eternity. But he needed to understand this power if he had any hope of escaping. "There has to be another way," he said, more to himself than to the figure. The figure watched him closely. "There is always another way. But it requires strength, both of mind and spirit. The crystal is a tool, not a master. If you can learn to control its power without letting it control you, you may yet survive." The fugitive's mind raced. He had spent his entire life mastering difficult situations, outsmarting enemies, and surviving the impossible. But this was different. The power here was ancient, sentient in a way, and dangerous beyond anything he had ever encountered. But he had no choice. He had come too far to turn back now. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his voice steady. The figure stepped aside, gesturing toward the crystal. "Touch it. Feel its energy. If you can withstand the pull, if you can resist its hunger, you may find the answers you seek." The fugitive hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. The crystal pulsed, its blue light casting strange shadows across the chamber. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched the smooth, cold surface of the crystal. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through his body. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, pure, unfiltered power, coursing through his veins. His mind exploded with visions, flashes of other worlds, other beings, ancient civilizations that had long since crumbled to dust. He could feel the weight of the crystal's energy pressing down on him, threatening to consume him. But he resisted. He had to. The visions intensified, bombarding him with images of destruction and chaos, of the countless souls who had come before him and failed. But amidst the chaos, he saw something else, hope. A flicker of light, buried deep within the crystal's core. He latched onto that hope, using it as an anchor to pull himself back from the brink. His breathing was ragged, his body drenched in sweat, but he didn't let go. Finally, the visions began to fade, and the energy flowing through him settled into a steady hum. He opened his eyes, gasping for breath, but alive. The figure watched him with a mixture of surprise and respect. "You have done what few before you could," they said. "But the journey is far from over. The crystal has accepted you, for now. But it will demand more." The fugitive stepped back from the crystal, his heart still racing. "Then I'll give it what it wants. But I'm leaving this planet." The figure nodded, their expression unreadable. "We shall see." Chapter 5, The Price of Power. The fugitive stumbled away from the crystal, his body still tingling from the rush of raw energy. His mind raced with what he had just experienced, the surge of power, the visions of ancient worlds, and the lingering presence of the alien force that had nearly consumed him. He was alive, but the cost was yet to be fully understood. The alien figure watched him silently, its glowing blue eyes unreadable. The chamber was eerily quiet, the hum of the crystal now reduced to a faint pulse, as if it had temporarily sated its hunger. The other two figures remained still, their blank expressions unchanged, as if they had long ago surrendered to the will of the planet. "You survived," the figure said, stepping forward. Its voice was calm, but there was a hint of something deeper, respect, or perhaps pity. "But the crystal's influence will not fade. It has marked you, and its power will call to you. Always." The fugitive exhaled, steadying himself against a rock formation. His muscles ached, and his head throbbed with the echoes of the visions he had seen. The crystal's power was immense, but it wasn't just a source of strength, it was alive, and it demanded something in return. "What does it want from me?" he asked, his voice low. The alien tilted its head slightly. "The crystal is the heart of this planet. It draws from those who seek its power, binding them to the energy of the world. In exchange, it grants them abilities beyond their comprehension. But the bond is not easily broken. The longer you stay, the more it will consume. Until there is nothing left." The fugitive's jaw tightened. "Then I have to leave," he said, his resolve firm. "I'll find a way off this planet before it's too late." The alien's expression darkened. "Leaving is not as simple as it seems. The crystal has already woven its energy into you. Even if you escape, its influence will remain. You will always carry a piece of this world with you." The fugitive shook his head. He wasn't willing to accept that. He had come here to hide, to escape the long arm of the Galactic Federation. But now, he found himself trapped by something far more dangerous, a planet that was very much alive, with a will of its own. "What are my options?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Is there a way to break the connection?" The alien hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "There is a way, but it is not without risk. To sever the bond, you must return to the source of the crystal's power, deep beneath the surface of this world. There, in the planet's core, the energy is at its most concentrated. If you can withstand its force and channel the energy back into the planet, you may free yourself." "And if I fail?" the fugitive asked, his eyes narrowing. "Then the planet will claim you, as it has claimed so many before," the alien replied. The fugitive took a deep breath. He had faced worse odds before. But this was different. The crystal's power was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and the thought of venturing deeper into the heart of this world filled him with a sense of dread. Still, he had no choice. He couldn't remain here, bound to a planet that would eventually consume him. "Where do I start?" he asked. The alien gestured toward a narrow tunnel at the far end of the chamber. "The path to the core begins there. It is a long and treacherous journey, and few have made it to the end. But if you are determined, it is your only chance." The fugitive nodded. He wasn't afraid of the journey. He had survived countless dangers before: galactic prisons, mercenaries, and bounty hunters. But this was something new, something far more personal. This wasn't just about survival, it was about freeing himself from a force that sought to control him. Without another word, he made his way toward the tunnel, the crystal's faint glow behind him casting long shadows on the cave walls. The air grew colder as he descended, the weight of the planet pressing down on him with every step. The path twisted and turned, growing narrower and steeper as he ventured deeper into the heart of the world. As he walked, the visions returned, flashes of ancient civilizations, their rise and fall, all bound to the same power that now coursed through his veins. He saw their cities, grand and magnificent, crumbling to dust as the planet's energy consumed them. He saw their leaders, once powerful and proud, reduced to hollow shells, their minds broken by the force they had sought to control. But amidst the chaos, he saw something else. A figure, shrouded in darkness, standing at the center of it all. The figure's face was hidden, but its presence was undeniable, a force of destruction, fueled by the very power that had claimed the civilizations before it. The fugitive shook his head, trying to clear the images from his mind. He couldn't afford to be distracted. He had to focus on the path ahead, on finding a way to sever the bond before it was too late. Hours passed as he descended further into the planet's depths. The air grew thin, and the temperature dropped, but the energy remained constant, pulsing through the walls of the tunnel like a heartbeat. The fugitive could feel it inside him, growing stronger with each step. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the end of the tunnel. The passage opened up into a vast cavern, illuminated by a massive, glowing pool of energy at its center. The energy swirled and pulsed, casting an eerie blue light across the cavern walls. This was the source. The heart of the planet. The fugitive stepped forward, the energy pulling at him like a magnet. He could feel its power, its hunger. It wanted him to surrender, to give in to its pull. But he wasn't about to let that happen. He stood at the edge of the pool, his eyes locked on the swirling energy. This was it. The moment of truth. Taking a deep breath, he reached out, his hand hovering over the surface of the pool. The energy crackled beneath his fingertips, and for a moment, he hesitated. But then he remembered why he was here, why he couldn't afford to fail. With a surge of determination, he plunged his hand into the pool. The energy exploded around him, engulfing him in a blinding light. Pain shot through his body, but he didn't let go. He could feel the planet's power coursing through him, trying to overwhelm him, to consume him. But he fought back. He focused on the core of the energy, pushing it back into the planet, forcing it to retreat. His body shook with the effort, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The energy roared around him, resisting his every move. But the fugitive was relentless. He had come too far to be defeated now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the energy began to subside. The light faded, and the pool grew still. The fugitive stood, his body trembling, but victorious. He had done it. The bond was broken. Chapter 6, A World Reclaimed. The fugitive stood at the edge of the energy pool, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The vibrant blue light that had once surged with overwhelming power now lay calm, reflecting the faint glimmer of victory in his eyes. He could feel the remnants of the connection between himself and the crystal dissipating, the invasive energy loosening its grip on his mind and body. But even in his moment of triumph, a nagging doubt crept into his thoughts. Had he truly severed the bond? Or was this merely a temporary reprieve? As he pondered the implications, the memories of the visions he had seen earlier resurfaced, images of ancient civilizations, their rise and fall intertwined with the very energy he had just confronted. Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, he felt a shift in the air, a tension that sent chills down his spine. The cave began to tremble, and the low rumble of a distant roar echoed through the chamber. The other figures, the ones who had stood near the crystal, emerged from the shadows of the cavern. Their expressions were no longer blank, now, they wore looks of anger and despair. "You foolish creature," one of them hissed, stepping forward. "You have disrupted the balance. Do you not understand what you've done?" The fugitive's heart raced as he faced them, the weight of their words crashing over him. "I did what I had to do," he replied defiantly. "I'm not going to be a pawn in this planet's game." The alien figure shook its head, frustration evident in its movements. "You do not comprehend the forces at play. The crystal binds us, and now you have unleashed chaos. The planet will retaliate." The chamber shuddered again, rocks tumbling from the ceiling. The fugitive felt the ground beneath him shifting, the once stable cavern transforming into a violent landscape. He had broken the bond, but it seemed the planet was not willing to let him go so easily. As the tremors intensified, the other figures moved closer to him, their eyes glowing with a newfound determination. "You must restore the balance," one of them urged. "You have disrupted the flow of energy, and the planet demands retribution. It will not rest until it claims you." Before he could respond, the ground opened up beneath them, revealing a chasm filled with swirling, dark energy. The very essence of the planet seemed to have turned against him, and the fugitive realized he had awakened something ancient and powerful. He took a step back, feeling the pull of the chasm. Panic surged within him, but he quickly steadied himself. "What do you mean? How do I restore the balance?" The figure gestured toward the chasm, its voice filled with urgency. "You must return to the crystal and channel your energy back into the core of the planet. It is the only way to calm its wrath." With no other choice, the fugitive turned and sprinted back toward the energy pool, the figures following closely behind. The cavern was collapsing around them, rocks crashing down as the planet retaliated for his interference. As they reached the edge of the pool, the fugitive took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts amidst the chaos. The glowing energy swirled around him, beckoning him to dive in once more. He could feel the power pulsing, the energy alive and waiting for him to harness it. But this time would be different. This time, he would not let it consume him. He had faced the crystal before, he had seen what it could do. Now he needed to take control, not just for himself, but for the planet that had turned against him. The other figures stood back, watching with a mix of skepticism and hope. "You must act quickly," one of them urged. "If you do not restore balance, the planet will claim you as it has claimed so many before." Gathering his resolve, the fugitive plunged his hand into the pool once again. The energy surged around him, threatening to overwhelm him as it had before. But this time, he focused on the core of the energy, the heart of the crystal. He visualized the flow of power, not as something to control, but as something to guide. With each heartbeat, he channeled his own energy, intertwining it with the essence of the planet. The chaos began to settle, the wild energy shifting under his influence. He could feel the tension in the air starting to dissipate, the cavern growing calmer. As the light intensified, he opened his eyes, locking gazes with the other figures. "Help me," he shouted. "Channel your energy into the pool. We need to restore the balance together." For a moment, they hesitated, but then they moved forward, joining him at the edge of the pool. Each figure placed their hands on the surface, and together, they unleashed a torrent of energy into the crystal. The chamber pulsed with a blinding light, the energy swirling around them as they fought to reclaim the power that had once threatened to consume them. The ground shook violently, but the fugitive held fast, his focus unwavering. He could feel the planet's energy responding, calming under their combined force. Slowly, the tremors began to subside, and the darkness receded from the chasm, replaced by a soft, warm glow. The crystal pulsed in rhythm with their efforts, the energy harmonizing as they poured their collective strength into it. Finally, with a brilliant flash, the energy stabilized, the chamber falling silent. The figures staggered back, breathing heavily as they looked at one another, disbelief etched on their faces. "You did it," one of them whispered, or replacing their earlier hostility. "You've restored the balance." The fugitive felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had faced the abyss and emerged victorious, but he also understood the fragility of the victory. The connection to the planet was still there, but now it was tempered, controlled. "Thank you," he said, turning to the figures. "But this is only the beginning. I can't stay here. I need to find a way off this planet, and I'll need your help." The figures exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to understanding. They had been trapped here for far too long, bound to the will of the crystal. Perhaps they could finally find a way to break free together. "We will help you," the tall figure said, stepping forward. "But know this, the planet is not done with you yet. There will be others who seek the power of the crystal. And they will not welcome you." The fugitive nodded, feeling the weight of their words. He was still a fugitive, and the galaxy was vast. But now he had allies, and perhaps together, they could forge a path to freedom. With renewed determination, the group prepared to leave the cavern, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path to freedom was fraught with danger, but together, they would navigate the unknown, reclaiming their destinies in the process. Chapter 7, Allies and Enemies. As they emerged from the cave, the fugitive squinted against the harsh light of the alien sun. The landscape was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just left behind in the cavern. Dust swirled in the air, and a chill ran through him as the reality of their situation settled in. They had managed to stabilize the energy, but the threat was far from over. The group stood together, the four figures silhouetted against the barren horizon. The fugitive could feel the weight of their gazes on him, a mix of hope and uncertainty. He had saved them from the crystal's grasp, but the question remained, could they trust him? "We need to move," he said, breaking the silence. "The planet may not retaliate immediately, but we're still vulnerable out here." The tall figure, the one who had first spoken to him in the cavern, nodded. "You're right. There are those who seek the crystal's power for themselves. We must reach the outpost before they find us." The fugitive frowned. "Outpost? What do you mean?" The figure gestured to the horizon, where the jagged peaks of distant mountains loomed. "There's a settlement not far from here. It was once a thriving community, but it has been abandoned for many years. It may offer us the shelter we need." The idea of an abandoned settlement felt both reassuring and unsettling. On one hand, it could provide a temporary refuge, but on the other, it was likely to be filled with dangers of its own, both natural and potentially hostile. "Let's go," the fugitive said, feeling the urgency of the situation. He motioned for the others to follow, and they set off across the rocky terrain, moving cautiously but with purpose. As they traveled, the tension in the air was palpable. Each step brought them closer to the settlement, but it also heightened their awareness of the dangers lurking in the shadows. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the rocks. After an hour of trekking, they reached the outskirts of the settlement. It was a series of dilapidated structures, their walls crumbling and covered in dust. Vines and strange alien plants crept up the sides, reclaiming what had once been a hub of activity. "This is it," the tall figure said, scanning the area. "Stay alert. There may." The fugitive nodded, his senses heightened. As they approached the nearest building, he noticed signs of disturbance, scuff marks in the dust, overturned debris. They were not alone. "We should split up and search for supplies," he suggested, his voice low. "But keep in contact. If you see anything unusual, signal back immediately." The group nodded, and one by one, they spread out, each heading into different structures. The fugitive chose a larger building at the center of the settlement, stepping inside cautiously. The air was stale, filled with the scent of decay and neglect. Faded posters hung on the walls, remnants of a time when this place was alive with activity. As he moved through the building, he searched for anything useful: food, tools, weapons. He rummaged through old crates and cabinets, his heart racing with anticipation. Just as he turned to leave one room, a sudden noise made him freeze. A sound echoed from the hallway, a low growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. He quickly ducked behind a large piece of furniture, peering around to see what was coming. Emerging from the shadows was a creature unlike any he had encountered before. It was large, its body covered in matted fur, with razor-sharp claws and piercing eyes that glinted in the dim light. The creature sniffed the air, sensing the presence of an intruder. The fugitive's pulse quickened. He needed to act quickly. He could either wait and see if the creature would pass or take a risk and confront it. He decided to take the fight to the creature. Steeling himself, he reached for his weapon, taking a deep breath as he prepared to leap out from his hiding spot. Just as he made his move, the creature lunged, and he barely managed to dodge its attack. The creature's claws scraped the floor as it spun around to face him, its eyes narrowing. With a swift motion, the fugitive fired his weapon, the shot echoing through the abandoned building. The creature let out a pained howl, staggering back but not falling. It was resilient, far more so than he had anticipated. Realizing that he needed to finish this quickly, he lunged forward, taking advantage of the creature's momentary disorientation. He tackled it to the ground, grappling with its massive form. The creature thrashed beneath him, but he held tight, using all of his strength to subdue it. With a final burst of effort, he aimed his weapon at the creature's neck and pulled the trigger. The creature went limp beneath him, its growl silenced. Panting, the fugitive pushed himself off the creature's body, surveying the room. He had won, but at what cost? He was in an abandoned settlement, filled with dangers he hadn't anticipated. Taking a moment to collect himself, he searched the creature's den, finding a stash of supplies, canned goods, a few tools, and a rusty but functional knife. It wouldn't last long, but it was something. He moved quickly to rejoin the others, eager to share what he had found. As he stepped back outside, he noticed one of the figures approaching from a distance, relief washing over him. "You're okay," the tall figure exclaimed as they reached him. "We heard a commotion." "I ran into some trouble," the fugitive replied, glancing back at the building. "But I managed to take care of it. We need to gather what we can and regroup." The figure nodded, their expression serious. "We found some supplies, but we're not alone here. We've seen signs of others, perhaps scavengers or worse." The fugitive felt a knot tighten in his stomach. They needed to move quickly. If others were in the area, they could pose a significant threat. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. "Let's gather what we can and get out of here," he said, determination in his voice. "We need to find a way off this planet, and we can't do that if we're caught in a fight." As they began to gather supplies, a sense of urgency enveloped them. They could feel the planet's energy shifting, a reminder that time was not on their side. With each passing moment, the tension grew, and the realization settled deep within him: this world was far from empty, and the true test of their survival had only just begun. Chapter 8, A Flicker of Hope. With the supplies gathered and a sense of urgency driving them, the fugitive and his newfound allies moved quickly through the dilapidated settlement. The tension in the air was thick as they navigated the crumbling buildings, acutely aware that danger lurked around every corner. The sounds of distant growls echoed through the ruins, serving as a grim reminder that they were not alone. As they exited one of the last buildings, the tall figure who had initially guided the fugitive halted suddenly. "We should check the perimeter before we leave," they said, scanning the area with wary eyes. "We don't want to be caught off guard." The fugitive nodded, feeling the weight of their situation. They were deep within hostile territory, and every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Together, they moved to a vantage point overlooking the settlement, carefully keeping low and out of sight. From their position, they could see the surrounding terrain, a mix of rocky outcroppings and patches of strange, twisted vegetation. It was a stark landscape, devoid of life, but the distant sounds hinted at lurking dangers. They spotted several shadows moving in the periphery, too large to be mere animals. Scavengers, one of the figures whispered, pointing toward a group of ragged individuals combing through the remnants of the settlement. They moved with a sense of purpose, rummaging through debris in old crates, their postures tense and alert. The fugitive felt a surge of unease. He had dealt with scavengers before, and they were often unpredictable, desperate individuals willing to do whatever it took to survive. "We should avoid them," he suggested. "If they find us, it could lead to a fight we can't win." The others agreed, and they carefully retraced their steps, opting for a less direct route toward the settlement's edge. As they moved, the tension within the group shifted from caution to determination. Each step felt heavier, the stakes growing higher as they neared the border of the settlement. Once they reached the outskirts, they found a narrow path leading toward a rocky hillside. "This way," the fugitive urged, pointing ahead. "If we can get to higher ground, we'll have a better view of the area and a safer escape route." As they climbed, the ground became uneven and treacherous, the rocks shifting beneath their feet. But they pressed on, driven by the hope of finding a way off this planet. The air grew cooler, and the atmosphere felt charged with energy as they neared the summit. Upon reaching the top, the fugitive paused, surveying the vast landscape. The horizon stretched out before them, revealing a vast expanse of rocky terrain and distant mountains. But it wasn't just the view that caught his eye, it was what lay beyond the mountains. In the distance, nestled in a valley, was a shimmering lake. The water sparkled in the sunlight, reflecting a brilliant blue hue that contrasted starkly with the gray landscape. It was an oasis in the wasteland, a flicker of hope. "What is that?" one of the figures asked, squinting toward the lake. "I don't know," the fugitive replied, his curiosity piqued. "But it could be our way off this planet. If we can reach the lake, we might find something that can help us escape." But just as they began to strategize their next move, a chilling howl echoed from the distance, shattering the tranquility of the moment. The sounds of growling grew closer, and the fugitive turned to see a pack of creatures emerging from the shadows. They were fast and agile, their forms a blur against the rocky terrain, and they moved with a predatory grace. "Run!" the fugitive shouted, adrenaline surging through him as he signaled for the others to follow him back down the hillside. They raced down the rocky slope, the sound of claws scraping against stone echoing behind them. The creatures were relentless, their growls growing louder as they chased after the group. The fugitive's heart raced as he pushed himself harder, adrenaline flooding his system. "To the lake," he urged, knowing that if they could reach the water, they might find a way to escape. But the path was treacherous, and the creatures were gaining on them. As they reached the base of the hill, the fugitive glanced back to see the lead creature, a massive beast with sharp teeth and piercing eyes, closing in. Panic surged within him, but he couldn't let fear take hold. He had to keep moving. They broke through the underbrush, reaching the edge of the shimmering lake. The water sparkled invitingly, but there was no time to appreciate its beauty. The fugitive skidded to a halt, scanning the shoreline for any means of escape. "Quick, into the water," he shouted, plunging into the cool depths. The others followed suit, wading into the lake as the sounds of the creatures drew closer. The water enveloped them, a refreshing contrast to the heat of their chase. But as they swam, the fugitive realized they needed a plan. He could feel the energy of the planet pulsing around them, and perhaps the lake held secrets of its own. If they could harness the power of the water, they might find a way to turn the tide in their favor. "Focus," he yelled to the others, treading water. "If we can channel our energy together, we might be able to create a barrier or something to protect us." With determination, the fugitive gathered his thoughts, drawing on the energy he had felt in the crystal. He visualized the shimmering power flowing through the lake, connecting with the essence of the planet. He could feel the others aligning with him, their energies merging in the cool water. The lake began to glow with a soft blue light as they concentrated, and the energy surged around them. The creatures paused at the water's edge, hesitant, their eyes darting back and forth as they sensed the shift. Now, the fugitive shouted, pushing the energy outward. A wave of light erupted from the lake, a protective barrier forming around them as they channeled their combined strength. The creatures growled and lunged, but the energy held firm, repelling them back. The fugitive's heart raced as he felt the power surge through him, the lake responding to their call. The creatures roared in frustration, pacing along the shore but unable to breach the barrier. "We did it," one of the figures exclaimed, relief flooding their voice. But the fugitive knew they couldn't stay here forever. The barrier would only hold for so long, and he could feel the tension in the air, the energy of the planet shifting once more. "Let's use this moment to regroup," he said, looking at the shimmering water. "If there's a way out, we'll find it together." As they floated in the protective embrace of the lake, the fugitive felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. This was just the beginning of their journey, and with each challenge, they would grow stronger. Chapter 9, Crossroads. As they floated within the shimmering barrier of the lake, the fugitive took a moment to gather his thoughts. The pulsating energy of the water wrapped around them, providing both safety and a strange sense of connection to the planet. He could feel the power surging beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the challenges they had yet to face. "We need to figure out what to do next," he said, glancing at the others, who were still catching their breath. The expressions on their faces reflected a mix of relief and determination. They had survived the initial threat, but the larger dangers of this world still loomed over them. One of the figures, a shorter one with dark markings across their skin, spoke up. "The lake seems to be a source of energy. Perhaps we can use it to find a way off this planet." The fugitive nodded, contemplating the possibilities. "But how? We need a vessel, something that can withstand the planet's energy and get us out of here." As if in response to his thoughts, the surface of the lake began to shimmer more brightly. The water rippled and swirled, and suddenly, a shape began to emerge, a sleek, shimmering craft formed from the very essence of the lake, its surface reflecting the light in dazzling patterns. "What is that?" the tall figure asked, eyes wide in disbelief. "I think it's our way out," the fugitive replied, awe washing over him. "The lake is responding to our need." They cautiously swam toward the vessel, the energy of the lake guiding them. As they reached the craft, it felt solid beneath their hands, warm to the touch, and pulsating with the same energy that had surrounded them. "Get in," the fugitive urged, motioning for the others to follow him. They climbed aboard the craft, which seemed to mold itself to their forms as they settled into place. It was as if the vessel was alive, adapting to them, ready to respond to their commands. As they situated themselves, the fugitive focused on the energy flowing around them, trying to sense how to pilot the craft. "Let's see if we can connect our energies to the vessel," he suggested. Together, they closed their eyes and concentrated. The fugitive visualized the energy from the lake merging with their own, flowing into the vessel. He could feel the craft resonate with their intentions, and slowly, it began to hum, responding to their collective will. "Now, how do we steer this thing?" he asked, opening his eyes. "Just think of where you want to go," the tall figure said, eyes narrowing in concentration. "The vessel will guide itself if we focus." With a deep breath, the fugitive visualized the distant horizon, the towering mountains beyond the lake and the stars shining brightly above. He thought of freedom, of escaping this planet and the chaos that threatened to ensnare them. As if sensing their thoughts, the vessel surged forward, gliding effortlessly over the surface of the water before breaking free into the air. The sensation was exhilarating, a rush of speed as they soared above the landscape, the world stretching out beneath them. The mountains loomed ahead, majestic and intimidating. But the fugitive felt a surge of confidence. They were moving fast, the vessel responding to their every thought and intention, almost as if it were a part of them. "We're doing it," one of the figures exclaimed, laughter mingling with relief. But just as they began to feel a sense of triumph, the air grew heavy with tension. The sky darkened, and the distant sounds of growls echoed once more, this time more threatening and closer than before. "What's happening?" the fugitive asked, his heart sinking as he glanced back at the shore. A swarm of creatures emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. They raced toward the lake, moving with a speed that made the fugitive's blood run cold. It was a horde, and they were determined to reclaim what had been disturbed. "Faster," he shouted, urging the vessel to accelerate. The craft responded, shooting forward as the creatures reached the water's edge, howling in frustration as they leapt into the air, attempting to reach them. The fugitive focused on steering the vessel higher, maneuvering it through the rocky terrain as they dodged the onslaught of claws and teeth. The landscape blurred beneath them, the mountains drawing closer with each heartbeat. "Keep it steady," he urged, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down on him. They needed to escape before the creatures could follow. As they neared the mountain range, the vessel's energy flickered. The fugitive could sense the strain. The vessel was powerful, but it could only handle so much at once. The creatures below were relentless, their howls echoing in the air as they pursued. Just ahead, the mountains split open into a narrow pass, dark and foreboding. "There," the fugitive shouted, pointing toward the opening. "We can make it through there." With determination fueling him, he guided the vessel into the pass, the walls of the mountain looming ominously around them. The sounds of the creatures faded as they entered the darkness, but the tension remained, thick and heavy in the air. Inside the pass, the craft moved smoothly, gliding through the shadows as the fugitive focused on navigating the narrow confines. The walls were rough and jagged, and he could sense the energy of the planet vibrating around them, responding to their presence. "We need to find a way out of this mountain," he said, his voice firm. "We can't let them trap us here." The others nodded, their expressions serious. Together, they concentrated, searching for any signs of light or energy that might indicate an exit. The passage twisted and turned, but they pressed on, determined to escape the darkness. Suddenly, a light appeared ahead, faint but unmistakable. The fugitive's heart raced as they drew closer. "There it is," he exclaimed, steering the vessel toward the source of light. As they exited the pass, the craft burst into a wide, open valley bathed in sunlight. The landscape stretched out before them, vibrant colors and strange vegetation, unlike anything they had seen before. It was beautiful, and for a brief moment, the weight of their journey lifted. But their relief was short-lived. From the valley below, a familiar howl echoed through the air. The creatures had followed them into the mountains, and now they were out for blood. "Go! Go!" the fugitive shouted, urgency lacing his voice as he urged the vessel forward. They had to find a safe place to regroup before the creatures caught up to them. As the vessel sped across the valley, the fugitive could feel the energy of the planet shifting again, a reminder that this was only the beginning of their struggles. But with allies at his side and newfound power at his fingertips, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 10, A New Dawn. The fugitive gripped the controls tightly as the vessel soared over the vibrant valley, the creatures hot on their tail. Their howls echoed in the air, a reminder of the danger that still loomed over them. He could feel the energy of the planet shifting beneath them, pulsing with an urgency that mirrored his own racing heartbeat. "Faster," he shouted, urging the craft to go even quicker. The landscape whipped past them, a blur of color and movement, but the sounds of the creatures grew louder, more frantic, as they pushed through the underbrush in pursuit. Ahead, the valley opened up into a vast expanse of land dotted with strange, bioluminescent plants. The air was thick with energy, and for a moment, the fugitive felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a way to turn this situation around. "Head toward those hills," he yelled, pointing to a range that jutted up from the ground like ancient sentinels. If we can reach the cover of the rocks, we might be able to lose them. The vessel responded to his command, veering sharply toward the hills. As they flew, the fugitive felt the weight of his choices. The energy from the crystal had changed him, awakened something within him, and he could feel the power coursing through the vessel, connecting them in a way he had never experienced before. As they approached the rocky outcrops, the creatures were closing in. The fugitive could see their forms darting through the colorful underbrush, muscles rippling beneath their fur as they chased after them. "Get ready," he shouted, steeling himself for what was to come. The vessel skimmed low over the ground, and just as they reached the hills, the fugitive cut the engines, allowing the craft to glide silently. They landed at the base of a massive rock formation, the sounds of the creatures growing distant as they raced past, not noticing the vessel's sudden halt. Breathing heavily, the fugitive turned to his companions, relief washing over him. "We made it," he panted, trying to calm his racing heart. "For now." They stepped out of the vessel, glancing around cautiously. The rocky outcrop provided ample cover, and the landscape was quiet, almost eerily so. The creatures had disappeared into the foliage, but the fugitive knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped. "We need to figure out our next move," he said, gathering the group. "The crystal's power is still a threat, and we can't stay here for long." The tall figure, who had been with him since the beginning, nodded in agreement. "We should find a way to communicate with others who may have survived. There may be more allies out there, people who understand the power of the planet." The fugitive considered this. "But we have to be careful. The last thing we need is to attract unwanted attention." As they strategized, the ground began to tremble slightly beneath them, and a low rumble echoed in the distance. The fugitive exchanged worried glances with the others. "The planet is restless," one of the figures remarked, glancing at the horizon. "It senses the imbalance. We need to find the source of the disturbance." The fugitive felt a surge of determination. "Then we'll do just that. We're not going to let this planet claim us as it has so many others. We will find a way to harness its power, not be consumed by it." They set off toward the hills, navigating through the rocky terrain. The air was thick with tension, and the ground continued to rumble intermittently, as if warning them of the dangers that lay ahead. As they reached the crest of the hill, they were met with an astonishing sight. Below them lay a sprawling valley, filled with lush vegetation and a shimmering river that wound its way through the landscape. In the distance, they could see the outlines of structures, remnants of a civilization long forgotten. "Look at that," the fugitive exclaimed, his heart racing. "This could be the key to understanding the planet's energy. We have to check it out." The group descended carefully, making their way toward the ancient structures. As they approached, they could see the intricate designs etched into the stone, much like the symbols they had seen in the caves. The energy in the air was palpable, buzzing with potential. But as they explored the ruins, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows flitted between the trees, and the distant sounds of movement hinted at more dangers lurking just beyond their sight. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the foliage, a tall, imposing being, adorned in ancient armor, with eyes that glowed like embers. The fugitive's heart raced as the figure approached, their expression unreadable. "Who dares to enter this sacred ground?" the being demanded, their voice deep and resonant. "We mean no harm," the fugitive replied, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We are searching for answers, for a way to restore balance to this planet." The figure studied them for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Many have come before you, seeking the power of the crystal. But few have understood its true nature. You are different." The fugitive felt a glimmer of hope. "We've faced the planet's energy and survived. We want to learn, to harness its power for good." The being stepped closer, and the fugitive could sense the weight of their presence. "Then you must prove your intentions. The power of this planet is not to be taken lightly. It is a gift, but it requires respect and understanding. You will face trials, and only by overcoming them will you earn the right to wield its power." The fugitive exchanged glances with his allies, determination settling in their hearts. "We're ready," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." The being nodded, and as they stepped back, the surroundings shifted, revealing hidden paths and ancient symbols that glowed softly. "Follow the signs, and be prepared. The trials will test your strength, your resolve, and your ability to work together." With a newfound sense of purpose, the group moved forward, ready to face the challenges that awaited them. The journey to understanding the planet's power had just begun, and they were determined to reclaim their destinies, not just for themselves, but for the countless souls who had come before them. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the ancient ruins, the fugitive felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. This time, they would not be consumed, they would rise to meet the planet's challenges head-on, united in their quest for freedom.